Now install the Three.js course boilerplate. Now this section is optional. Okay, so if you've done everything beforehand, you already have the course boilerplate. But I've put all of that so far onto GitHub. So you can git clone the repository in case you either got stuck down here or you've finished the course and you just want a familiar template to start from. Now, if we're using GitHub to pull a repository, we need to have a Git client installed, and on Windows, I use Git for Windows. Okay, so you can download that from here, follow the defaults. I've already done that, so I already have Git, and so I can check that by opening a command prompt or terminal or PowerShell, and you just type git-v for version, and I have that version, which is actually the latest version, but it doesn't need to be 2.44, it could be 2.1 if you had that. Okay, now with Git, if you wanted to download this boilerplates repository from GitHub, that's the link here, Three.js-Boilerplate-TS-Vite. Okay, there's the source, main TS, and CSS. I have an extra docs file, just a screen grab showing the boilerplate, but that's really only necessary because on this repository, I'm showing it in the README just down here. So there's also the README and also a Vite config.js, and that is actually specific because I have an extra thing in here for GitHub pages. It's just so I can push updates and view it on GitHub pages. But anyway, there are instructions on here. Now, if you're familiar with Git, and you want to clone this boilerplate locally so you can work on it and use it, consider whether you want to also push your changes back to GitHub. For that, you'll need an account. And if you do, rather than downloading the repository using that URL, so that will be git clone that URL, you can create a fork of the repository. And instead of that being my name, that will be your account name. And you will be able to push changes to your version of the boilerplate that exists on GitHub. Okay, so that's useful if you want that option and you have a GitHub account. Otherwise, you can just clone using the default repository URL. So just to show you how that works, if I copy that and go back into command again and just go to a folder on my system, D, and just right click, it pastes what I just copied from the browser. So git clone the repository URL. That URL comes from this green button here. It's that exact URL. So git cloning that URL. If you press enter, it clones the repository into a new folder that matches the same as the repository name there. So if I cd into that folder now, Three.js-Boilerplate-TS-Vite, I just press tab on the keyboard and then filled in the rest of the letters, enter, and now type code dot like that. It will open VS Code with this being the root folder. Okay, a new VS Code, and here is our code that we can start editing like so. We got errors, we have to install it. Okay, so it says that down here, npm install npm run dev. So let's do that. So open a terminal, up here, terminal, new terminal. I'm using PowerShell now. So npm install like that. That will install everything that it finds in package.json here. So that will be types, 3.GUI, 3 TypeScript Vite, plus GH pages, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so npm run dev, okay, and that's our boilerplate as it was in the last video. That includes all the controls, .GUI, and stats. Okay, now GitHub Pages is quite useful for pushing your project to a live web server on the internet, and GitHub Pages is one of those options. If you have forked the repository, as I mentioned earlier, you will be able to run these commands: npm run build, run preview, and then run deploy. That will put a copy of it into your forked repository under a branch called GH Pages. And after some time, you'll then be able to access that website using your account name. It'll be lowercase, like mine was, .github.io 3.js-Boilerplate-TS-Vite. And so I've already set up GH Pages on this repository that I just installed. So if I press that, that is being served over the internet using my GitHub Pages page. Okay, and in the package.json, that's actually the command there, deploy. And in the documentation, npm run deploy. Now this section's really only useful if you've forked your own copy of the boilerplate. But that's a bit advanced, and if you've never done that before, don't worry. It's all optional, and you can just continue the course using the boilerplate that you've already built in these sections up here. Excellent.